Hello and welcome to the second in a series of webinars supporting the Worksmart Dynamics purchase requisition and order process. In this webinar, we'll be raising both a standard purchase requisition and a blanket purchase requisition in D365. I'll also show you some of the functionality that we have for both internal and externally hosted catalogues. I would like to point out that we have detailed training how-to guides available for download from the Worksmart Dynamics SharePoint site. These are really great documents that will supplement what you learn and see in today's webinar. We will be starting the purchase requisition process from the Preparer dashboard by selecting Generate New Purchase Requisitions, which is across to the right. This will take us to the purchase requisition list page. From here, we just select New from the top left to start the process of raising a purchase requisition. The first one, again, will just be a standard type of purchase requisition. And for this order, we will know the price and the quantity of what we're buying. So as you can see, the Create Purchase Requisition pop-up window has come up. The fields you need to type in here is the name, and this is the name that's meaningful for you. It won't go to the supplier, but it is a searchable field, and you can search down the track if you're looking for a specific purchase requisition that you've raised in the past. So let's call this webinar test number 4. The requested date is the date that you want the goods and services to be delivered. Again, it defaults to today's date, but I can select if I want something for Friday. The rest of the fields we leave blank or we don't touch at this stage of the implementation. These fields may become applicable in subsequent phases of the project, but for Go Live, we don't touch the accounting date, the default project, the legal entity, or the project ID. We just click OK, and it takes us to the main screen. The screen you can see here is the main purchase requisition input screen. All D365 screens are effectively the same, where you have a header area, or what we call the ribbon menu. We have the header information, in this case the purchase requisition header, the summary information. We then have the line details, which we will complete, or the requisition lines, and then we have the specific details for each individual line that we create if we generate a multi-line purchase requisition. So if we go back to the requisition header, the information we need to complete is the business justification, and it's in this section where we select whether it is a standard or a blanket order. We can also select whether it's a client recharge standard or a client recharge blanket order. Applicable training for client recharge orders will be provided to those teams that require that functionality. But in this case, we'll just be raising a standard purchase requisition. This detail section is optional, but we can, again, that information can be there if it can be meaningful to people down the track. Optional information. We're now ready to scroll down and start adding our purchase requisition lines to our order. We click on the Add Line, and it pre-populates the line with some default information. You can see that it's added me, David Hodkinson, as the requester, because I'm the preparer. This is where, if you're raising it on behalf of another requester, you could select other requesters that you've been authorized to raise requisitions on behalf of. So in this example, I'm able to raise a requisition on behalf of Alison or myself. We'll just leave it as me for now, but keeping in mind that the default cost center, delivery address, and line manager is driven by this requester field. The buyer legal entity, operating unit, and item number for standard orders aren't touched. Our next field that we need to input is the procurement category. We can see here the procurement category hierarchy. As mentioned in the previous overview webinar, the procurement hierarchy is now effectively set up as words and 3 levels of information. And what we need to do is find the lowest level of the procurement hierarchy so that it can apply the cost to the appropriate GL code. In this example, we'll raise maybe an IT one. It's for IT hardware. And let's say it's for a laptop. We can see the applicable level of the hierarchy is the one without the additional drop-down box. So it's this 3rd level, IT, hardware, computers, laptops and servers that we need to get to. We highlight that, we click OK, and it's populated that information. The product name is the next field. So this is the information. This information will go to the supplier, and it's effectively the description of the order, and it needs to be, again, meaningful to both us and the supplier. So in this example, let's pick it's HP laptops per quote 1, 2, 3, 4. We then identify the quantity, again as a standard order. The assumption is that we know both the price and the quantity that we're purchasing. So let's say we want to purchase 5 laptops. We tab across. The unit of measure, we typically type in each EA and tab across. What you can do also, again, all these fields, you can see all of the units of measure available to us. But for all standard orders, a recommendation is that we'll just type in each. If we tab across, we have the unit price. So again, this is where we put in the price of each of the laptop, inclusive of GST. So in this example, let's say that they're $1,800 each, inclusive of GST. So we're ordering 5 laptops, $1,800. We scroll across, currency just defaults. Vendor account is where we select the vendor, and we can type in the vendor name. Again, we can search by clicking down, and we can either search on the vendor number if we know it, or their name. But in this example, we can just, from this field, so here, we'll search the vendor account name. Let's assume that we buy them from complete offer suppliers. By typing in just a few letters, you can see it brings up all of the numbers. And again, we know that we don't buy our laptops from complete offer suppliers, but I'm just using that as an example. The order status is now draft. So I've now completed the first line of the requisition. If we needed to add an additional line for perhaps some IT peripherals associated with that order or something else, again, we would just click Add Line, and it would select a second line that we would complete. As we've now completed the first line, we can go down into the line details and we can see the specifics for that order. Again, I'll show you this in a subsequent session when we do the blanket orders, but this is where we can see some specific details associated with this line, the default address, and where we can change the address, the financial dimensions, where we can change the financial dimensions. We've now basically completed this first requisition. We're ready to submit it. So to submit an order for approval, we go to the top ribbon menu, we click Workflow and Submit. And you can see we have the opportunity to type in a comment. Please approve. And we click Submit. And the order goes from draft status and it's now in review. If in the future you're not sure where an order is setting for approval, you are able to search that again through the workflow and workflow history. You're also able to recall an order once you've submitted it at any point prior to approval. So whilst it's in review status or draft review status, you can recall the order. Again, workflow history will show you who it's sitting with for approval. So now we've effectively completed our first purchase requisition. Having completed our first requisition, we're now in a position to raise a second order, and this time, for the purpose of the webinar, we'll raise a blanket order. Again, to start the process, we click New. The pop-up menu will come up. For the requested date, what we're suggesting is that people use the final delivery date, again, if it's associated with a blanket. Blanket orders are typically raised for a period of 3, 6, or 12 months. And so we're suggesting the requested date, you select the last date that this might be applicable. So again, in this example, let's say that it's a 12-month blanket order for a waste services as an example. And the last delivery date will be the 29th of September 2019. Again, these other fields we don't have to touch. We just click OK. And it brings us again to the same order screen. In the purchase requisition header, whereas last time we selected standard, this time we select blanket. We click blanket. Again, we have the opportunity to add some information details, again, not sent to the supplier, but just for our information down the track. We don't touch anything else on this header screen. We're now ready to add purchase requisition line. I'll scroll that down a bit. And again, the first field that we need to complete is the procurement category. So in this example, let's say we'll do some waste services. So it's under facilities management, waste disposal, and let's say it's general waste. We click OK. And again, you can see I've selected the lowest level within the hierarchy to ensure that it's generating the right category code. The product name, again, this information is what goes to the supplier. So in this example, because it's a blanket, we might flag it as 12 months waste contract for facility X. In the quantity, this is where we input the budgeted amount. So let's say a budgeted amount for waste removal for that facility is $4,000 per annum. We tab across to the unit. We type in, again, each. You can see, because it's a blanket order, the unit price is defaulted to 1. The reason why that is important is when we get to the receipting stage, we always receipt based on quantity. So we need to set up the blanket orders with the quantity being the value of the order, the unit price being 1, so that we can easily receipt values and draw down on that total order amount. Again, we tab across to the vendor and we type in our vendor. I don't know their number, so in this example I could type in Suez. Again, we can see we can pick the Suez vendor account. If we're not sure which one, we can also click on the vendor account number, which will take us through to the vendor information, and I can see the vendor account, I can see their phone number, and in the information miscellaneous details, we should also be able to identify their ABN and make sure we're getting it to the right supplier. As I mentioned before, the D365 screens stack on top of each other, so just by clicking X, it will take me back to my purchase requisition screen. So I've raised a blanket order, $4,000 is the budgeted amount with Suez. If we scroll down, we can see here that we've got all of the options available to us. So for example, if we needed to change the address, we click on address, and you can see the default address, because it's come from my delivery address in the system, is Pitt Street. So clearly we don't want to have the waste being picked up or delivered at Pitt Street. So we have the options here to select a different uniting address. We can add an address which might be applicable for a single use, or we need something delivered to a different type of address. Or we can select another address, which again comes into play potentially for client recharge orders, where we want a good or a service delivered to a particular client address, and that's where we can select those. But in this example, let's pick we want to change the address. So I want to change the delivery address to the facility, and in this example, again, I can search for, let's say it's Bowden Bray, and I want to search this field where it begins with Bowden as an example. I can also search that it contains the word Bowden, but let's say it begins with Bowden. We click apply, and we can see the applicable Bowden Bray addresses. And in this example, let's say I want it to go to that address. I click OK, and you can see now the delivery address for my purchase requisition has changed to the Pennant Hills Road address. If I wanted to validate the financial dimensions, and again change the applicable cost center for that, this would be where I would do it. I would update the cost center field. I would search the applicable cost center, or I would overtype that with the applicable cost center where I want those charges to go. One of the other functions that the system has at the line level is through this financials tab here, is the ability to split the costs across multiple cost centers, and it's through this accounting distribute amounts function. Let me just show you that now. So again, you can see the default distributions is hit the again my standard cost center. If I want to add a split for that cost center, I can update this with an alternate cost center. So in this example, I want to change the cost center to the Treasury cost center, or I want to split the costs with them, and I know their cost center is 999820. I can then click on that, and again it's updated that. Also, again, I have the opportunity to search these fields if I don't know the exact cost center. I can search by their name. I then click out, and you can see here I have the opportunity to distribute the amounts by percentage, amount or quantity. I can distribute equally. So if I click on that, you can see it splits at 50-50. I also have the ability to change it 60-40 or 55-45, however we want to split that amount. I've now distributed those amounts. I can click out of that and back to my purchase requisition. So now I'm back to the standard purchase requisition screen. And again, just to recap, I raised the purchase requisition, a blanket purchase requisition for 12 months of waste for Facility X for a budgeted amount of $4,000, which we can draw down upon. I've split the financials across two cost centers, and I've changed the delivery address to the Bowden Bray address in Normanhurst. That's effectively the main types of functionality we expect users to have to do on a day-to-day basis, and effectively, completes this section of raising a blanket purchase requisition. I'm now in a position to submit that order for approval, so I click Workflow and Submit. I can add comments in there. Please approve urgently. And that order will now go to my manager for approval. So I've now completed 2 purchase requisitions. What I would like to do is raise a third requisition and show you how to use the functionality that we have for both internal and externally hosted catalogues. I want to raise a new order, so I click New at the top left. I add a name. A selected date. Let's say I want it delivered next Friday. I click OK. In the header, I need to update the reason, standard order. So the 2 options that we have available to us are this Add Products option and the External Catalogues option. Let me explain the difference. The Add Products is for internally hosted catalogues that we will be adding into D365. The catalogue that we'll have available to us for Go Live, and which I'll be able to show you today, is the internally hosted Arjo Huntley catalogue for aids and appliances, which is effectively our beds and lifters that we use within our residential facilities. Over time, additional catalogues and products will be added to the system. For the external catalogues, the main one that everybody uses, or a number of users use, is the Bunzl catalogue. And so let me just show you that one first. The full functionality for the Bunzl isn't set up within this training environment. But to access the Bunzl catalogue, I will click on External Catalogues. It will give me a pop-up screen. It will then let me search and have the list of the available externally hosted catalogues to us. Bunzl will be the only one for Go Live. I'll select that. It will then take me through to the Bunzl system, exactly as it's processed today through Basware. I configure my order in that system, and then the order comes back into the system for approval. But what I will show you is the Add Products for our internally hosted catalogues. And effectively what this does is lets us pick specific orders and items that we have available to us. So again, this is the screen. We will have pictures available for some of these products. I can search. Let's say I want to order a Sorrento bed. Again, I click Sorrento as the product name, and you can see I've got a king single bed, the buffer bar, the end buffer bar. So let's just say I want to select the bed. Again, if I wanted to add more items, I could, but I'm just, let's say I want to order the bed. I click OK. And what it does is it pre-populates all of that applicable information for that order into the line section. So it has the procurement category, it has the quantity, which I need to update. It pre-populates the price and obviously the supplier. For the first time though, what you'll see is it's pre-populated this item number field, and this will also be the same for the external catalogues. These are the suppliers' item numbers, which will be meaningful for them when they come through. So the only time we ever use these item numbers in our purchase requisition lines are when they are being pre-populated for us by our internal or an externally hosted catalogue. Other than that, the process now is exactly the same. We're in a position to either review that order, confirm the address, change the financials if we have to. Otherwise, if it's just a standard order, we're ready to click Workflow and then Submit. One thing I would like to show just before we wrap up this session on purchase requisitions is how to attach a document. So again, up in the ribbon menu, you can see a little paperclip, and by clicking on that, it gives us the opportunity to attach a document to our purchase requisition. And whilst that document won't go through to the supplier, what we'll do is it will be attached to the requisition for reference and will also be accessible by the approver. To add a document, we just click New. It might be a new file. It will then give us the ability to browse our computer to attach a particular document. I won't in this example, but you can see how it works, and it's quite effective. Some other good functionality worth sharing at this point is the copy function. So copy lets us copy this full requisition to create a new one. The copy lines functionality is also pretty cool in that it lets us copy lines from existing purchase requisitions that we've raised to copy those lines into this purchase requisition. So you would then just select the different requisition and the lines that you wanted to select. And again, in this example, if I wanted to add consultancy services from that purchase requisition number 2, I could add that line to this requisition that we just processed. And you can now see, in addition to the Sorrento bed, I've now added $20,000 worth of consulting services. I can then, of course, change that before I submit it to, say, be $10,000 worth of services, but it just lets you fast track you're updating your requisition lines because you can copy them over. And again, you can also copy complete requisitions over. So I'm now in a position to submit this third requisition for approval. Again, you don't need to complete a comment in there. That's optional. We've now submitted that order. So now what will be happening in the background, those orders will be going through both an approval process and generating purchase orders to be sent to the supplier. This effectively completes this section of the webinar. We've now raised 3 purchase requisitions. We've done a standard purchase requisition, a blanket purchase requisition. We've raised an internally hosted catalogue requisition. We've demonstrated how to change addresses, cost centres, how to split costs, and how to copy lines and or purchase requisitions into new ones. And that really is the core functionality of the system. I think I mentioned earlier that there are how-to guides available on all of this. These are really good documents, and hopefully between having this I guess first-hand view of looking at the system and then accessing that training material, you will be well placed to proceed and start raising purchase requisitions when we go live in that first week of November. I'll wrap up the session at this point. Please dial in to the next webinar, which we will take you through how to process goods receipt, which is the next part of that process, which is a requirement to allow the three-way match to happen. So with that, I thank you and hope you enjoyed the webinar.